Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. Today we are going to learn chapter 11, immunity, and this chapter comprises 1 hour of lecture and 3 hours of tutorial. We have two subtopics under immunity, the immune response and development of immunity. Now let's see the learning outcomes. For 11.1 immune response, you have to know how to define immunity and state the types of immunity. Describe the general structure of the antibodies and state the classes based on its structure. State the roles of lymphoid organs in immunity and explain the various types of antigen and antibody interactions. So now let's see what is immunity. Immunity is ability of the body to recognize and protect itself against foreign substance. Foreign substance is the pathogen. It can be virus or bacteria or any soluble toxin protein which can cause disease. So the pathogens can be certain virus or bacteria or fungi or protozoa, and also can be the soluble toxin proteins. So under the immunity, we have two types, the inborn or innate immunity and also the acquired or adaptive immunity. And under the acquired, okay, we have the natural and artificial immunity. Okay, and under it we have the active and passive immunity. Okay, let's see the innate immunity. So innate immunity comprises the first line of defense and the second line of defense, and the adaptive immunity is including the third line of defense. So these are the non-specific defenses, the first line and the second line defense, and the specific defenses is the third line defense. So let's see the non-specific defenses, the innate immunity. Our first line defense usually such as the skin, mucous membranes, and also the secretions from the skin or maybe the mucous membranes in your nose. Okay. The second line of defense, such as the phagocytic leukocytes, any antimicrobial proteins, inflammatory responses, and also fever. And the specific defenses is the lymphocytes, antibodies, and also the memory cells. So these are the diagrams showing the non-specific defenses under the innate immunity. The first line of defense, the skin, mucous membrane, okay, and also your teardrops, okay. The second line defense, such as you get injured, okay, so your white blood cells, okay, will help in defense your body from the pathogens which enter your body. Okay, the N formation is also actually from the second line of defense. This one is an example of the second line defense when you get injured. So what happens when you get injured, such as pinprick into your skin, okay, so it will cause damaged cells in your skin. So these damaged cells will release the chemical signals, okay, such as the histamine, the lymphokine, okay. So your blood vessel will become dilate, that we call as a vasodilation, and becoming more permeable, and this will also stimulate the blood clotting, okay. And this process will attract the phagocytic white blood cell to the infected tissue, okay. So the infected tissue, of course, it will have the pathogen there, okay, and this will ingest, okay, the pathogen will ingest by the phagocytosis of the phagocytic leukocyte. Okay, so this process, okay, the swelling, the redness, pain, okay, we call it as a inflammatory response. The third line defense, the specific defenses under the adaptive immunity, we have two types, the humoral immunity and the cell-mediated immunity. Okay, later we will discuss, okay, about the specific defenses. Okay. All right. Now we go for the next one, the antigen. So antigen is an antibody generator. It can generate the antibody in our body. Okay. So antigen is a foreign substance or intruder or any non-self that can provoke an immune response due to the presence of the foreign molecule. So this foreign molecule usually protein on the membrane surfaces. And what is epitope? Epitope, also known as the antigenic determinant, is a certain part of an antigen which can provoke immune response. So this epitope or antigenic determinants, usually in one antigen, it has many epitopes, which different epitope will bind with different antibody. So you can see here examples of the epitopes. We use different shapes, okay? So you can see here it will bind with this one with the antibody A, this one with the antibody B, and this one with the antibody C. So it will bind with different antibodies. Okay, so this one is a diagram of the differences between antigen and antibody. So usually our antibody in a Y shape, this one. Okay, so and these antigenic determinants or epitopes will bind with the different types of antibodies. So you can see they have the different shapes. Okay. What is antibody? Okay, antibody also known as immunoglobulin. Okay, short form as the IG. It's not Instagram. Okay, is a specific protein produced by plasma cells due to the presence of an antigen that can bind to specific antigen. Okay, so this antibody will be produced by the plasma cells. So it will only produce with the presence of an antigen. Okay. All right, our antibody, usually the structure is Y-shaped and it has 4 polypeptide chains. So you can see here, one, 2, 3, 4. Okay, which they have 2 heavy chains and 2 light chains. So in this diagram, the heavy chain is the blue color, the light chain is the red color. And this polypeptide chains is being held together by disulfide bonds. Okay, so these are the site where it will bind to the antigen. Okay, all right, so antibody structure, okay, it has 2 regions, which is the constant or C region. Okay, this is the constant region. Okay, and it also have the variable region. So the variable region here, okay, is the region which will bind to the antigen. Okay, a heavy chain V region and a light chain V region together will form the unique binding site for an antigen. Okay, so example here, this one is the antigen, antigenic determinant. So the antigen binding site of the antibody is this part. Okay, so we have 5 classes of antibody which based on the differences of the C region. okay, based on the differences of the C region. So we have the IgG, IgE, IgD, IgM, and also IgE. So let's see for the first one, the IgM. Okay, this one is about 5 to 10% of the antibodies, and the largest one because it has 5 monomers of the antibody that we call as a pentamer. Okay, so it's being held together by adjoining the J chain and the most reactive. And this is the first antibody that produced during the first exposure to antigen. So the function of the IgM is agglutinating antigen and also the complement fixation. Okay, antibody IgA is about 10 to 15% in our body, and it has 2 monomers, what we call as a dimer, and it mainly focus on mucous membrane. Okay, inside the secretory cells. So since it in mucous membrane, so it can be found in the saliva, mucus, sweat, GI tract, tears, milk, in the colostrum. Okay, so the function, it can prevent attachment and entry of the antigen to epithelial surfaces, and also can protect the mucosal surface. The IgD, okay, less than 1%, okay, and it's single or monomer, can be found mainly on the surface of the B cell, okay, as an antigen receptor. So the function, act as antigen receptor on the B cell. So you can see here is the B cell. So this is the antibody. Okay. So it helps to stimulate B cell to differentiate to plasma cell and memory B cell, and it also help to initiate development of humoral immunity. The IgG antibody is the most abundant. It's about 75 to 85% in our body. Okay, and it's the smallest, and it's only one monomer. The the IgG is the one and only antibody that can cross the placenta, okay, from mother to the baby. Okay, and this one is a long-lasting one because it mostly is a memory cells. Function, provide passive immunity, which is as a temporary protection to the fetus, and also function in complement fixation. And our last antibody is the IgE. It's the least produced, it's about 0.002%. And it is the monomer, but then it's slightly larger compared to IgG. Can be found on the surface of the basophils and also the mast cell. And this IgG can release histamine, which is being triggered by the antigen. It will release the histamine. So function of the IgG, it will promote the inflammation, okay, or any allergic reaction and anaphylaxis. It means that serious allergic reaction. So you can see here the allergic reaction, okay. So whereby the plasma cell will release the IgE antibodies, okay. So this IgE, okay, will promote inflammation, whereby the mast cell will release the histamine. So this is the histamine. Okay. All right. Now we go the types of blood cells. Okay. So actually we have blood cells, 3 types, okay, of the blood cells: the erythrocyte, leukocyte, and also the platelet. Okay. The erythrocyte we had learned before this. Now we go focusing on the leukocyte. Okay. So we have two types of leukocyte based on the constituency of the granules. The one that have granules, we call it as a granulocyte, and the ones that did not have granules, we call it as a granulocyte. So the granulocyte is the phagocytic cells, comprises of the neutrophil, eosinophil, and also the basophil. Okay, whereas for the agranulocyte, we have the monocyte and the lymphocytes. Monocytes later will differentiate into the macrophage, which also is a phagocytic cells. And now we are going to learn more on lymphocytes here. Okay, so this is your blood cells. So we have the platelets, okay, the red blood cells, and also the white cells. So the most important is the lymphocytes. Okay, okay. So this is the lymphocytes which produce in the bone marrow. Okay, so we have the cytotoxic T cells which kill the virus infecting the damaged cells. Okay, we have the helper T cells which help the cytotoxic T cells and the B cells in their immune functions, and the B cells which produce antibodies. So why we call it as a T cells and B cells? Because for the T cells, it migrate and mature in the thymus. Okay, all of it produced in the bone marrow. Okay, but where does it mature? Okay, so for the cytotoxic T cells and helper T cells, migrate and mature in the thymus, and whereas for the B cells, mature in the bone. Okay, so that's why we call it as the B cells. Okay, now let's see the lymphoid organs. Okay, so these mature B and T cells migrate to the lymphoid organs, okay, such as the thymus, okay, bone marrow, lymph node, spleen, and also the tonsil. Okay, so you can see here from the bone marrow. Okay, so the stem cell will produce in the immature lymphocytes, and by the blood it will travel to the thymus. Okay, and from the thymus it will become the T cells, the cell mediated immunity. And if it's migrate to the bone, it will be called as a B cells. Okay, which is important in humoral immunity. Okay, so let's see the lymphoid organs. So before this, we had learned the lymphatic system. Okay, so lymphoid organs. So we have here such as the adenoid, tonsil, the lymph nodes. Okay, Peyer's patch in the small intestine, the appendix, spleen, and also especially for the thymus and the bone marrow is for the lymphocytes. Okay. Uh, so these lymphoid organs is important, especially for screening the lymph. Okay, the lymph. Okay, guys. Now let's see the antigen antibody interaction. Okay. So any antibody which bind to the antigen, they will form what we call as antigen antibody complex. Okay, so this antigen antibody interaction, we have three types: the neutralization, the opsonization, and also the activation of complement system and pore formation. So these are the functions of immunoglobulins. Okay, so we have the three: opsonization, whereby the phagocyte will coating the antigen with the antibody enhanced phagocytosis here. Okay, neutralization, whereby the antibody will try to neutralize, okay, the toxin by attaching to the toxin. Okay, and also blocks the adhesion of the bacteria to the mucosal membrane. And the third one is activation of the complement system. okay, which cause the inflammation and also the cell lysis. All right, guys, done for the 11.1. Now we go for further the second subtopic, the development of immunity. So the learning outcomes for the 11.2 development of immunity. So you have to know how to state the two types of immune response, explain the humoral immune response and the cell-mediated immune response against the infection, and also explain the primary and secondary immune responses. Okay, under the immune system development, okay, as we know that when antigen invading our body, there are three possibilities happen. The first one, the engulfing of the pathogen by the macrophage. Okay. The second one, bind with specific antigen receptor on the B cells. And the third one, infect cells. Okay. So you can see the diagram here, whereby the bacteria is being phagocytized by the phagocytic cells through phagocytosis, right? Okay, so again, uh, we have two types of immunity, the innate and adaptive immunity. And under the acquired immunity or adaptive immunity, we have the natural and artificial. Okay, under this both natural and artificial, we have the active and the passive immunity. Okay, so now we go for the types of immune response. Okay, so as we know that we have two types of immune response, the third line defense, okay, the humoral immune response, whereby it will effective for the free antigens, and the cell-mediated immune response, which is effective for infected cells. Okay, all right, so you can see here. So the left side, the blue color, is the humoral antibody-mediated immune response. Okay, and the cream color on your right is the cell-mediated immune response. Okay, when the first exposure to the antigen, okay, usually if it's the free antigens, okay, whereby the antigen go through to your body, okay, this will stimulating the process, okay, will stimulate the B cells, okay, stimulate the B cells. All right, if it's from the cell mediated immune response, usually the antigen will be displayed by the infected cells, okay. So this will stimulate the cytotoxic T cells. All right. So this will be discussed later, okay, in your tutorial class. Okay. So the immune response, the humoral, okay. So this will mostly involve the B cells, which it will produce the antibody, and this antibody will be secreted into the body fluid. That's why we call it as a humoral body fluid. Okay, with the help of the T helper cell, and the cell mediated usually mainly involve the T cells. Okay, all right. Now we go for the adaptive natural immunity. Okay, adaptive natural immunity. Okay, we have two types. Okay, the passive immunity, which obtain uh, from the outside. Okay, it's very effective. Okay, but immediate but short-lived. Okay, for active immunity. Okay, which will be produced by own antibody. By how? Due to entrance of the antigen. Okay, so the effectiveness, it will be longer time but long lived, and it also have immunological memory. Okay, all right. So for the natural active immunity, so there are two stages. Okay, the first one is the primary immune response. Okay, and the second one is the secondary immune response. Usually the primary immune response is because the first time exposure to the antigen, and the secondary immune response usually because of the second time or maybe many times of the subsequent exposure to the same antigen. All right. Okay, this is the latest Malaysia immunization schedule for 2020. Okay, which effective November 2020. All right. So this one is a immunization program. Okay, for Malaysia. So we have to immunize our kids, our child, okay, since birth, okay, since birth to 15 years old. Okay, so you can see here the first one from birth, there will be BCG and the hepatitis. It's really important, okay. And then the second, third, and fifth month, they have the DTP, hepatitis B, okay. This one vaccine, and then at the 6 month they have the measles, okay, but this one is only Sabah, and then they have 9 month and 12 months, okay, the MMR, okay, the JE, okay, and 18 months usually they have the booster dose, okay, 21 months, okay, for the JE, and then for when you are 7 years old, so you have the measles, rubella, diphtheria, tetanus. When you are in 13 years old, so you will get the HPV uh, vaccine, and also the last one is when you are 15 years old, you will get the tetanus vaccine. Okay, so these are the Malaysia immunization schedule, the national immunization program. Okay, the latest um, updated schedule. Okay, all right. So please, guys, make sure that later you and your family should be get the vaccine. Okay, vaccinated. It's really important. All right. Okay, guys, that's all for today. Okay, so done your chapter 11 immunity, and I hope that all of you can understand well in this chapter. Okay, that's all. Bye and thank you.